The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Harrison's main compound as General Marcus Thompson stepped out of his black sedan. His polished boots clicked against the concrete with military precision, each step echoing the authority he had earned through 25 years of distinguished service. The base buzzed with its usual activity: soldiers conducting drills, vehicles rumbling past, and the constant hum of a military installation at full operation. Thompson had been assigned to Fort Harrison 3 months ago, tasked with preparing the base for an important international military exercise. Representatives from 12 different countries would soon arrive to participate in joint training operations, and everything had to be perfect. The general prided himself on running a tight ship, and he expected nothing less than excellence from every person under his command. As he walked toward the main administrative building, Thompson's keen eyes surveyed his domain. He noticed Private Johnson struggling with equipment maintenance, made a mental note about the landscaping near the officers' quarters, and observed the efficiency of the morning routine. Everything appeared to be in order, just as he demanded. Inside the building, the general's attention was caught by the sound of someone humming softly while working. He followed the gentle melody down a corridor he rarely traveled, one that led to the maintenance and custodial areas of the facility. The humming grew louder, accompanied by the rhythmic sound of a mop against the floor. Thompson rounded the corner and found himself looking at a man in his 50s, wearing the standard janitor's uniform of Fort Harrison. The man was of average height, with graying hair and weathered hands that spoke of years of honest labor. He moved with quiet efficiency, cleaning the floors with the same attention to detail that Thompson demanded from his soldiers. What struck the general most was the peaceful expression on the man's face as he worked, completely absorbed in his task. The janitor looked up and immediately straightened when he saw the general approaching. His name tag read Miguel Santos, and his eyes held a respectful alertness that Thompson appreciated in all personnel, regardless of their position. "Good morning, sir," Miguel said with a slight nod, his voice carrying a faint accent that Thompson couldn't immediately place. "I'll be out of your way in just a moment." Thompson found himself curious about this quiet man who seemed to take such pride in his work. In his experience, the character of a military installation could often be judged by how even the smallest details were handled, and Miguel's work area was spotless. "No need to rush," Thompson replied. "You're Miguel Santos, correct? How long have you been working here at Fort Harrison?" Miguel paused in his mopping, seeming surprised that the commanding general would engage him in conversation. "Yes, sir. Miguel Santos. I've been here for about 8 years now, sir. Started right after I moved to this area with my family." The general noticed Miguel's careful, measured way of speaking, as if he was choosing each word with deliberate thought. There was something about the man's demeanor that suggested more depth than his position might indicate, but Thompson had learned not to make quick judgments about people. 8 years, Thompson mused. "You must have seen quite a few changes around here. Different commanders, new procedures, various exercises and operations." Miguel's eyes brightened slightly, and he nodded. "Yes, sir. Many changes. Each commander brings their own way of doing things. I've learned that paying attention and adapting is important no matter what work you do." Something in Miguel's response intrigued Thompson. The janitor spoke with a wisdom that came from observation and experience, not just routine labor. The general found himself wondering about Miguel's background, his story, and how he had ended up working as a custodian on a military base. "Where did you work before coming here?" Thompson asked, genuinely curious now. Miguel's expression became thoughtful, almost distant. "I worked in many different places, sir. Different countries, different situations. Life has a way of taking you on unexpected journeys." Before Thompson could ask another question, his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, appeared at the end of the corridor. "General Thompson, sir." Your 9 o'clock appointment is here. The delegation from the State Department. Thompson glanced at his watch and realized he had been talking with Miguel longer than he intended. The morning's schedule was packed with meetings about the upcoming international exercise, and he couldn't afford to fall behind. Of course, Thompson said, then turned back to Miguel. It was good talking with you, Mr. Santos. Keep up the excellent work. Thank you, sir, Miguel replied, returning to his mopping as Thompson walked away. As the general headed to his meeting, he couldn't shake his curiosity about the janitor. There had been something in Miguel's eyes when he mentioned working in different countries, a depth of experience that seemed unusual for someone in his current position. Thompson made a mental note to learn more about Miguel Santos when his schedule allowed. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of briefings, planning sessions, and administrative details. The upcoming international exercise was complex, involving military units from countries across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Communication protocols had to be established, cultural sensitivities addressed, and logistical challenges solved. Thompson threw himself into the work with his characteristic intensity, but part of his mind kept returning to his conversation with the quiet janitor. During lunch, Thompson found himself walking past the area where he had encountered Miguel earlier. The hallway was empty now, but spotless, showing the results of the man's careful work. The general paused, looking around the space and noticing details he had missed before. The floors gleamed, the windows were crystal clear, and even the light fixtures appeared to have been recently cleaned. Miguel clearly took genuine pride in his work, treating even the most mundane tasks with professional care. That afternoon, Thompson attended a meeting with the base's senior staff to discuss final preparations for the international visitors. Colonel Martinez, the base's operations officer, was reviewing the language support services they had arranged. We've contracted with a translation service to provide interpreters for the main meetings, Martinez explained. However, we're still short on people who can help with informal communications and day-to-day interactions. Some of our guests speak limited English, and it would be helpful to have more bilingual personnel available. Thompson nodded, understanding the challenge. Effective communication was crucial for successful international cooperation, and language barriers could create unnecessary complications. As the meeting continued, his thoughts drifted again to Miguel Santos and his mention of working in different countries. The general wondered what languages the janitor might speak and whether he could be of any assistance with the upcoming cultural exchange. As the day wound down, Thompson made his way through the base on his evening rounds. He believed in being visible to his personnel, and these walks allowed him to observe operations and maintain personal connections with the men and women under his command. Tonight, his route took him past the maintenance areas once again. Miguel was there, working the evening shift, carefully organizing supplies and preparing for the next day's tasks. He looked up when he saw the general approaching, once again straightening respectfully. "Good evening, sir," Miguel said. "Working late tonight?" "Just making my rounds," Thompson replied. "I like to see how things are running across all shifts." Miguel nodded approvingly. "That's good leadership, sir. My father always said that a leader who only sees the daylight never understands the full picture." The comment struck Thompson as remarkably insightful. "Your father sounds like a wise man. What kind of work did he do?" For a moment, Miguel's expression became distant, and Thompson sensed he was accessing memories that carried both pride and pain. "He was a teacher, sir, and sometimes other things, depending on what was needed." The vague answer intrigued Thompson further, but before he could pursue the topic, an alarm began sounding across the base. Both men looked up, recognizing the signal for an emergency drill that had been scheduled for that evening. "Duty calls," Thompson said, already moving toward the command center. "Good evening, Mr. Santos." As Thompson hurried away to oversee the drill, He carried with him a growing sense that there was much more to Miguel Santos than met the eye. The janitor's thoughtful responses, his careful way of speaking, and his hints about a diverse background all suggested a story worth knowing. The emergency drill proceeded smoothly, with all units responding according to protocol. As Thompson supervised the exercise from the command center, he found his mind returning again and again to his conversations with the quiet custodian who seemed to possess an uncommon depth of insight and experience. Later that night, as Thompson reviewed paperwork in his office, he made a decision. Tomorrow, he would make time to learn more about Miguel Santos. Something told him that the unassuming janitor might prove to be more valuable to the upcoming international exercise than anyone had realized. In the general's experience, the most important discoveries often came from paying attention to the people others overlooked, and Miguel Santos was clearly someone worth understanding better. The next morning brought an unexpected crisis that would change everything at Fort Harrison. General Thompson was reviewing intelligence reports when Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell burst into his office with urgent news. A group of foreign military observers had arrived earlier than scheduled, and there was a serious communication problem developing. "Sir, we have a situation," Mitchell said, slightly out of breath. "The advance team from the Romanian delegation landed 2 hours ago, but there's been a mix-up with our translation services. Their interpreter became ill during the flight and couldn't continue, and our contracted service can't provide a replacement until tomorrow afternoon." Thompson frowned, understanding the implications immediately. The Romanian team was scheduled to conduct preliminary security assessments and coordinate with base personnel throughout the day. Without proper communication, the entire timeline for the international exercise could be compromised. "What about our personnel? Anyone on base speak Romanian?" Mitchell shook her head. "We've checked, sir. We have people who speak Spanish, French, and German, but no Romanian speakers. The Romanian colonel speaks some English, but his team members are struggling and they're getting frustrated." Thompson stood and began pacing, his mind working through alternatives. The international exercise was too important to start with communication failures and cultural misunderstandings. They needed a solution immediately. "Where are they now?" Thompson asked. "Conference room B, sir. Colonel Radu, their team leader, is trying to manage the situation, but you can see the stress building. They're supposed to tour our communications facility this morning, and without proper interpretation, it's going to be a disaster." Thompson made a decision. "Let's go meet with them directly. Sometimes personal attention can help bridge communication gaps until we find a proper solution." The two officers made their way quickly to Conference Room B, where they found a tense situation developing. Colonel Ion Radu, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s wearing the uniform of the Romanian Land Forces, was attempting to communicate with several American officers using a mixture of broken English and frustrated gestures. His 3 subordinates sat nearby, clearly uncomfortable with their inability to participate in the discussions. "Colonel Radu," Thompson said as he entered the room, extending his hand. "General Marcus Thompson, commanding officer of Fort Harrison. I apologize for the communication difficulties you're experiencing." Colonel Radu's face showed relief at seeing the base commander take personal interest in their situation. "General Thompson, thank you for coming. We understand there are problems with interpretation services. My English is not so good for technical discussions, and my men—" He gestured helplessly toward his team. "We're working on a solution," Thompson assured him. "In the meantime, perhaps we can begin with a basic overview and address the most critical coordination needs." As Thompson tried to facilitate the meeting using simplified English and hand gestures, the situation became increasingly awkward. Technical military concepts couldn't be adequately communicated through basic vocabulary, and the Romanian officers grew more frustrated with each passing minute. Colonel Radu's attempts to translate for his men only added to the confusion. Thompson was beginning to consider postponing the entire morning's schedule when there was a soft knock at the conference room door. Miguel Santos appeared in the doorway, pushing a small cart with cleaning supplies. "Excuse me, sir," Miguel said quietly to Thompson. "I was told to clean this area, but I can come back later if you're in an important meeting." "That's fine, Miguel," Thompson said absently, his mind still focused on the communication crisis. "Just go ahead with your work." Miguel began quietly organizing his supplies, but as he did, Thompson noticed something remarkable happening. The janitor's eyes had focused on Colonel Radu, and he appeared to be listening intently to the conversation. When one of the Romanian officers made a comment in his native language, expressing obvious frustration, Miguel's expression changed subtly. Colonel Radu noticed Miguel's attention and, in a moment of desperation, addressed him directly. "Vorbești Romana?" he asked hopefully. Thompson watched in amazement as Miguel straightened and responded fluently in Romanian. "Da, vorbesc română. Pot să vă ajut cu traducerea?" The change in the room was immediate and dramatic. Colonel Radu's face lit up with relief and surprise, while his team members leaned forward eagerly. Thompson stood frozen, hardly believing what he was hearing. The quiet janitor was speaking Romanian with perfect fluency, his accent and intonation suggesting native-level competency. "General Thompson," Miguel said, turning to address his commanding officer with a respectful but confident demeanor that seemed entirely new. Colonel Radu was explaining that his team is concerned about the security protocols for the communications facility tour. They want to ensure their observation methods align with your operational security requirements. Thompson stared at Miguel, trying to process what was happening. "You speak Romanian?" "Yes, sir," Miguel replied simply. "Would you like me to help facilitate this meeting?" For a moment, the room fell completely silent. Thompson looked from Miguel to Colonel Radu, who was nodding enthusiastically and speaking rapidly in Romanian to his team members. The entire dynamic of the morning had shifted in an instant. "Yes," Thompson said slowly. "Yes, please help us." What followed was the most efficient and productive international coordination meeting Thompson had ever witnessed. Miguel moved seamlessly between English and Romanian, translating not just words but concepts, cultural nuances, and military terminology with precision and understanding. He explained American security procedures in terms that made sense to the Romanian officers and conveyed their concerns and suggestions back to Thompson with clarity and context. Colonel Radu was particularly impressed. During a brief break in the discussions, he spoke to Miguel in Romanian, and Thompson watched the janitor respond with what appeared to be detailed knowledge of Romanian military structure and protocols. "What did he say?" Thompson asked Miguel. "Colonel Radu was commenting on my familiarity with military terminology," Miguel explained. "He asked if I had military experience." "And do you?" Miguel paused for a moment, seeming to weigh his response carefully. "Some, sir. From many years ago." As the meeting progressed, Thompson found himself watching Miguel more closely. The man's transformation was remarkable. While maintaining his respectful demeanor, he had assumed a level of professional competence that seemed to come from deep experience. His translations weren't just linguistic. They demonstrated understanding of military operations, international relations, and cultural sensitivities that couldn't be learned from textbooks. When the Romanian team was ready to begin their facility tour, Colonel Radu specifically requested that Miguel accompany them as interpreter. Thompson agreed immediately, recognizing that they had stumbled upon an invaluable resource. As the group prepared to leave the conference room, Colonel Radu pulled Thompson aside. "General," he said in his careful English, "your man Miguel, he is very good, very professional. Where did you find him?" Thompson realized he didn't have a good answer to that question. "He's been working here for 8 years, he said. "I'm learning there's more to his background than any of us realized." After the Romanian delegation left with Miguel for their tour, Thompson turned to Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, who had witnessed the entire extraordinary scene. "Get me Miguel Santos's personnel file," Thompson said. "Complete background, employment history, everything we have on him." "Yes, sir," Mitchell replied. "Sir, that was remarkable. I had no idea he spoke Romanian." "Neither did I," Thompson admitted. "And I'm beginning to suspect that Romanian might not be the only language he speaks." An hour later, Thompson was reviewing Miguel's file in his office, and what he found was both enlightening and puzzling. Miguel Santos, age 53, had been born in Peru. He had worked various jobs before coming to Fort Harrison: maintenance worker, translator for a small business, teacher's aide at a community center. His references were excellent, his work record spotless, but the file revealed very little about his background before arriving in the United States. What caught Thompson's attention most was a single line in Miguel's application. Under foreign language skills, he had listed Spanish as his native language and indicated some knowledge of other languages. The understatement was so profound it was almost comical. Thompson was still studying the file when his secure phone rang. Colonel Radu was calling from the communications facility. "General Thompson," Radu's voice came through clearly, "I must tell you this tour is going perfectly. Miguel is extraordinary interpreter. He understands everything. Technical systems, security protocols, operational procedures. My men are very impressed." "I'm glad to hear it's going well, Colonel." "General, may I ask you something? Miguel, he has worked with international military operations before, yes? His knowledge is too detailed for someone with only basic experience." Thompson found himself giving the same answer he had given earlier. "I'm still learning about his background myself, Colonel. He's proven to be full of surprises." When the tour concluded and Miguel returned to the administrative building, Thompson was waiting for him. The janitor had resumed his quiet demeanor, but Thompson now saw him through entirely different eyes. "Miguel, I think we need to have a conversation," Thompson said. "A longer one this time." Miguel nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this moment. "Yes, sir. I suppose we do. My office, please. And Miguel?" Thompson paused. "Bring your mop and supplies. I want to maintain the appearance that this is a routine interaction." As Miguel gathered his equipment and followed Thompson toward the command section of the building, he seemed to be preparing himself for a conversation he had perhaps hoped would never be necessary. Thompson, for his part, was beginning to realize that Fort Harrison's quiet janitor might be the most qualified person on the entire base to handle the complexities of their upcoming international military exercise. The revelation of Miguel's Romanian language skills was clearly just the beginning. Thompson found himself wondering what other capabilities his unassuming custodian might possess, and how a man with such obvious qualifications had ended up spending 8 years cleaning floors and emptying trash cans on a military installation. The answers, Thompson sensed, were going to be far more interesting and complicated than anything he could have imagined. General Thompson closed his office door and gestured for Miguel to take a seat across from his desk. The janitor set his cleaning supplies carefully to one side and sat down with the same quiet dignity he had always displayed, but now Thompson could see the intelligence and experience behind his calm exterior. "Miguel," Thompson began, leaning back in his chair, "I think it's time you told me who you really are." Miguel was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands folded in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there during their previous casual conversations. "My full name is Miguel Eduardo Santos," he said slowly. "I was born in Lima, Peru in 1970. My father was a university professor who taught languages and literature. My mother was a diplomat with the Peruvian Foreign Service." Thompson listened intently, already sensing that this story was going to be far more complex than he had anticipated. "I grew up speaking Spanish and English at home. Miguel continued. When my mother's work took our family to different countries, I learned the local languages. By the time I was 18, I spoke 6 languages fluently. 6 languages, Thompson repeated. Which ones? Spanish, English, French, German, Italian, and Portuguese, Miguel said. Later, I added Romanian, Russian, Arabic, Mandarin Chinese, Japanese, and some others. Thompson felt his understanding of reality shifting. Some others? How many languages do you speak, Miguel? Miguel considered the question carefully. Fluently? 12? Conversationally? Perhaps 15 or 16. I have basic communication ability and several more. The general sat in stunned silence for a moment. And you've been working as a janitor for 8 years. Yes, sir. Miguel's voice held no defensiveness, just simple acknowledgement. Why? Thompson asked. With those kinds of skills, you could work anywhere. The State Department, the United Nations, major corporations. Why are you cleaning floors on a military base? Miguel's expression became distant, and Thompson could see him accessing memories that were clearly difficult. It's a long story, General. Are you sure you want to hear it? I have time, Thompson said firmly, and I need to understand. Miguel took a deep breath and began. After university in Peru, I joined my country's foreign service like my mother. I was good at languages, good at understanding different cultures, so they sent me to work in embassies around the world. Lima, Buenos Aires, Rome, Berlin, Beijing, Moscow. For 15 years, I helped facilitate communications between governments, translated important documents, participated in diplomatic negotiations. Thompson nodded, beginning to understand the depth of Miguel's background. That explains your familiarity with international protocols. In 2008, I was working at the Peruvian embassy in Bucharest, Miguel continued. That's where I learned Romanian. I was also doing some consulting work for other Latin American embassies, helping with translations and cultural briefings. It was good work, important work. I felt like I was making a difference. Miguel paused, his expression growing darker. Then everything changed. There was a corruption scandal in the Peruvian government involving several high-ranking foreign service officials. I wasn't involved, but I had worked closely with some of the people who were accused. When the investigations began, anyone with connections to the scandal came under suspicion. Were you charged with anything? No, sir. I was cleared of any wrongdoing after a thorough investigation. But my career was over. In diplomatic circles, even the appearance of impropriety can be fatal. No embassy wanted to hire someone who had been connected, even peripherally, to a corruption scandal. Thompson was beginning to understand Miguel's story, and he felt a growing sense of outrage at the waste of talent and experience. So you lost your career through no fault of your own. I spent 2 years trying to rebuild my reputation, Miguel said. I took freelance translation work, taught language classes, worked for small consulting firms. But the diplomatic world is small, and word travels fast. Every time I seemed to be making progress, someone would remember the scandal, and my opportunities would disappear. How did you end up in the United States? Miguel's expression softened slightly. I met my wife, Elena, during this difficult period. She was an American nurse working with an international medical organization in Romania. She saw what was happening to my career and convinced me to come to America with her for a fresh start. And you've been here ever since? We came here 12 years ago. Elena got a position at the regional hospital, and I looked for work using my language skills. But American employers were skeptical of my foreign credentials, and the positions that were available required security clearances that were difficult for a recent immigrant to obtain. Thompson was beginning to see the full picture. So you took whatever work you could find. I worked in restaurants, taught Spanish at community centers, did translation work for small businesses, Miguel explained. The pay wasn't good, but it was honest work. When the position at Fort Harrison became available 8 years ago, it offered steady employment and good benefits for my family. Elena and I decided it was the best option available. But Miguel, Thompson said, with your skills and experience, surely there were other opportunities. Miguel smiled sadly. General, you would be surprised how little value the world places on a diplomat without diplomatic status. My resume looked impressive on paper, but employers saw an overqualified foreign worker who might leave as soon as something better came along. The janitor position at Fort Harrison offered something more valuable than prestige. It offered stability and respect. Respect? Yes, sir. I've worked here for 8 years, and in all that time, I've been treated with dignity by everyone on this base. From the lowest-ranking soldier to the previous commanding officers, people have been kind and respectful. That means more than you might think to someone who has experienced professional exile. Thompson felt a deep appreciation for Miguel's perspective, but also a sense of profound waste. Miguel, are you telling me that for 8 years, this base has had a senior diplomatic translator working as a janitor, and nobody knew? Nobody asked, sir. I did my job well, kept to myself, and tried not to draw attention. I learned long ago that sometimes the safest place is in the background. But today, with the Romanian delegation, today was different, Miguel acknowledged. I saw people struggling to communicate, and I knew I could help. Sometimes you have to decide whether to stay safe or do what's right. Thompson stood and walked to his window, looking out at the base he commanded. Miguel, what I'm about to ask you is completely voluntary, and I want you to understand that your answer won't affect your employment here in any way. Yes, sir? The international military exercise begins in 1 week. We're expecting delegations from 12 countries: Romania, Germany, France, Italy, Brazil, Colombia, China, Japan, Poland, and 3 others. We've arranged for professional interpretation services, but having someone on staff with your linguistic abilities and cultural knowledge could be invaluable. Miguel waited quietly for Thompson to continue. I'm asking if you would be willing to serve as a cultural liaison and interpretation coordinator for the exercise. It would be temporary duty, lasting about 3 weeks, and you would work directly with my staff to ensure smooth communications between all the participating nations. General, Miguel said slowly, are you offering me a chance to do diplomatic work again? I'm offering you a chance to use your real skills in service of something important, Thompson replied. The success of this exercise could impact military cooperation between these countries for years to come. Communication failures could undermine everything we're trying to accomplish. Miguel sat quietly for several minutes, and Thompson could see him wrestling with emotions and considerations that went far beyond the immediate question. Finally, Miguel looked up with a determination Thompson hadn't seen before. Yes, sir. I would be honored to help with the exercise. Thompson smiled. Excellent. But Miguel, I need to ask you something else. If you're going to work with these international delegations, they'll need to know your qualifications. Are you prepared to have your background become known around the base? Miguel considered this carefully. General, I've spent 8 years being invisible. Perhaps it's time to step back into the light. Good. Now one more question. When I assign you to this role, what title should I use? What position would most accurately reflect your qualifications and authority? Miguel thought for a moment, then smiled with a mixture of irony and renewed confidence. Senior Cultural Affairs and Linguistic Coordinator would be appropriate, sir. That reflects both my diplomatic experience and my current institutional knowledge. Thompson nodded. Consider it done. Report to Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell tomorrow morning at 800 for briefings on the exercise protocols. She'll coordinate your integration with the planning staff. As Miguel stood to leave, Thompson stopped him with one final question. Miguel, why didn't you ever mention your background before? In all our conversations, All these years working here, you never indicated that you had this level of experience and capability." Miguel paused at the door, his cleaning supplies in hand. "General, I learned something important during my years in exile. Sometimes the most powerful position is the one where people underestimate you. I've spent 8 years observing this base, learning about American military culture, understanding how things really work rather than how they appear to work. That knowledge, combined with my diplomatic experience, makes me more valuable now than I would have been 8 years ago." "You've been preparing," Thompson realized. "All this time, you've been preparing for an opportunity like this." "I've been learning, sir. There's always more to learn, no matter what position you hold or what background you bring to it. A good diplomat knows that the most important skill is the ability to listen and understand before trying to be heard and understood." After Miguel left his office, Thompson sat alone contemplating the remarkable conversation he had just experienced. In the span of a single morning, his quiet janitor had been revealed as one of the most qualified international affairs professionals he had ever encountered. More than that, Miguel's story had taught Thompson something important about leadership, respect, and the value of paying attention to the people others might overlook. The next week would bring the largest international military exercise Fort Harrison had ever hosted. Thanks to a moment of crisis and Miguel Santos's willingness to step forward when needed, Thompson was confident it would also be the most successful. Sometimes the most extraordinary resources were hiding in the most ordinary places, waiting for the right moment to emerge and make a difference. The general made a note to review the personnel files of every person working on his base. If 8 years of exemplary service could conceal diplomatic expertise of Miguel's caliber, he wondered what other hidden talents and valuable experiences might be quietly serving at Fort Harrison, unrecognized and underutilized. Miguel Santos had taught him that true leadership meant seeing the potential in every person under his command, regardless of their current position or apparent status. It was a lesson Thompson would carry with him for the rest of his career.